All right, we'll call to order the first meeting of 2024 of the Planning and Zoning Board for the January 24th. Bobby, call the roll, please.
Joan Kovac. Andra King.
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz.
Here.
Derek Lewis.
Here.
Darlene Smith.
Here.
Carla Coleman.
Here.
Fred Stacer.
Here. Okay, it's the whole starting lineup here tonight. And next item on our agenda is our typical 30-second moment of silence. So if you would, please be quiet for the next 30 seconds. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes.
Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. I believe Mr. Lewis already seconded it. We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the minutes as revised? We received the later draft. Any questions or more changes? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on that item.
Darlene Smith.
Yes.
Derek Lewis.
Yes.
Joan Kovac. Andra King.
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz.
Yes.
Carla Coleman.
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is individuals who are going to testify tonight need to be placed under oath, excuse me, not under order, under oath. I guess I had a good holiday, yeah. Go ahead, Bobby.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First item on the agenda tonight is Alliance West Atlantic. Address is 1500 West Atlantic Boulevard et al. And it's P&Z item 23-12 with 5 zeros and a 7. And Max, are you presenting? You definitely aren't Lauren. Okay. See, you thought I lost my mind over the holiday. I knew who you are. Can't fool me.
I'm up.
You're up,
Okay.
sir.
All right, good evening. Max Weems, Development Services, sitting in for Lauren tonight. She is out. She's getting married this weekend, so I know that's her business,
good
but
for her.
you see her, be sure to congratulate her. So this item is the major site plan approval for the Alliance West Atlantic, PZ 2312-507. The property is located north of West Atlantic Boulevard, west of North Andrews Avenue, and south of Martin Luther King Boulevard. Here, the existing condition of the site. It's predominantly industrial in character. There's some storage and some minor commercial activity. The applicant is requesting the major site plan approval in order to construct 176,408 square foot warehouse with accessory office space, along with the associated landscaping and parking. The total footprint of the building is, like I said, 176,408 square feet on a 374,806 square foot site. The lot coverage is approximately 47%. The site plan was reviewed by the DRC 3 times, most recently in November of 2023, and by the Architectural Appearance Committee on December 5th of 2023. Pursuant to section 155-2304C, application subject to staff review or staff recommendation, the Development Services Director has compiled the department reports for the DRC meeting, which are recorded on file with the Department of Development Services Should the board find that the application has provided competent substantial evidence to satisfy the review standards for major site plan approval, the Development Service Department recommends approval of the major site plan subject to the following conditions, comments and conditions. So all unused easements shall be abandoned. An access easement for the northern properties shall be provided in order to access Atlantic Boulevard. A new survey shall be submitted showing this access easement for the northern properties and the abandonment of existing easements prior to building permit approval. Just to explain that a little bit, on this aerial, you can see that there's some properties to the north of the subject site which do obtain their access from Atlantic Boulevard in the south. The site plan, number 2, the site plan is proposing to close the access point to Wawa on Atlantic Boulevard and share the southern access point from the subject property. Provide an access agreement for both the southern connection to the Wawa property as well as the proposed connection on the east side through the Wawa property. These shall be separate from the access easement for the northern properties to access Atlantic Boulevard. Number 3, in accordance with Code Section 155-5603F2, the property must maintain the 10-foot wall and superior landscaping on either side of the wall along the entire length of the eastern property line for the purposes of screening the overhead doors facing North Andrews Avenue. Should you have questions about any of these, I do have the site plan available and the rendering which would show this subject wall. Number 4, a unity of title shall be obtained in accordance with Code Section 155.2401C for the 3 subject folios owned by Alliance West Atlantic LLC. Number 5, provide a recorded plat in accordance with Code Section 155.2410 plat per the Broward County Platting Determination Letter. And number 6, standard conditions of approval A through D, which are required prior to building permit and zoning compliance permit approval. This concludes the staff presentation. The applicant is here for presentation.
Okay. Before we go to the applicant, does anybody have any questions of staff?
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
go ahead, Mrs. Cole.
Mr. Williams, just to clarify, you do recommend approval of this project?
Correct.
It's worded a little strangely, so okay.
I think I'll wait until after the applicant because it's not just a little technical question, unimportant. Okay. Mrs. Davis, Counselor, you're up.
Good evening, Heidi Davis with the law firm of Gunster, 450. There's down, thank you. 450 East Las Olas Boulevard, Suite 1400, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33301. I'm here tonight on behalf of Alliance West Atlantic, the owner of the property located at 1500 West Atlantic Boulevard. With me today from Alliance is Eric Carlson, and our whole development team is here if you need any questions asked later on.
Okay.
The property consists of 3 consolidated parcels, approximately 8.6 acres, and it's located east of the CSX railroad tracks, west of North Andrews Avenue, north of West Atlantic Boulevard, adjacent to the new Wawa. The property is zoned I-1 and has an industrial land use designation. Permitted uses within the I-1 zoning district include warehouse and office uses. The property is surrounded by various industrial uses. These are the current existing conditions on the property. See that there's a lot of storage, warehouse, already distribution facility on the property. It's an older site with minimal landscaping. Here's another just existing conditions. Alliance proposes to construct a 1-story warehouse distribution facility of approximately 176,000 square feet, of which 15,000 square feet of that will be mezzanine space. The structure will only cover 47% of the lot, and the height of the structure is 32.5 feet. The industrial warehouse distribution use is compatible within the I-1 zoning district and the surrounding properties. The proposed site plan complies with all code requirements and provides for a safe flow of access around the site for vehicles and pedestrians. The warehouse is oriented from north to south with ample parking and loading areas. The property is currently going through the platting process, and access to and from the property will be from the south at West Atlantic Boulevard and on the east at North Andrews Avenue. A dry retention area is located at the southwest corner to retain stormwater runoff from the property. The structure is designed with many architectural features to enhance each of the facades. The structure maintains a simple, clean, and contemporary style with prominent corner and entry features. Horizontal and vertical decorative reveals in recess areas, as well as variations in parapet height, break up the mass and scale of the structure. Various materials, including aluminum and glass, add to the modern aesthetic of the structure. Construction of the new building will consist of painted concrete tilt-up panels, clear anodized aluminum storefront windows with impact-resistant gray tinted glass, and aluminum sunshades and entry canopies. The building's paint color schemes consist of 3 colors: nebulous white for the main body of the building, gray matters used to identify the main entries and in some offset panels, and Gregorian bay used as an accent color in carefully selected areas next to windows and main entries. All of the incorporated architectural features in the design add special interest and compatibility with nearby properties and site elements. The proposed landscape plan has been beautifully designed, creating lush landscaping around the entire property. The landscape plan is made up of multiple layers of landscaping, including a layer around the perimeter of the property as well as around the structure. Generous buffer yards as well as street trees and shrubs have been added to not only create a beautiful project, but to provide natural screening from the rights of way. The existing property, as you were shown on the existing conditions, photos, is void of any landscaping. On the screen is a view looking southwest from North Andrews Avenue of the project. This project will greatly enhance and improve the entire area. Additionally, a perimeter 10-foot wall will be constructed along the east side along North Andrews Avenue, and trees and shrubs will be planted on both sides of the wall. So we are here to answer any questions you may have. Our whole team is here, so let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Okay. Before we go on, you have no problem with the 6 conditions of staff?
We don't.
Okay,
Thank you.
go ahead. Next, yes, Mrs. Coleman, go ahead.
Is this building totally spec, or do you have tenants that you could tell us about tonight?
It's all spec right now.
Mrs. King, go ahead.
Good evening. I reviewed the subted report, so I know you have the walls around it, but adjacent to the property is the Wawa's,
Yes.
and I frequent that area a lot, and there are a lot of unhoused people that kind of hang out, beg for money, and I just don't want your beautiful location to be someplace new and fresh for them to sleep and make their new home, so there won't be any gate in front of, and it doesn't seem like it's gonna, I don't know what type of businesses will be there, but will there be businesses that'll be there all night? Because if not, I just see this as a new place to make my new home. And it's something that we're all dealing with, but I just want you to keep it in mind because the wall's not going to stop them because they still have access to your property.
That is correct. And we've put together an entire SEPTED plan also. There's going to be extra lighting and there'll be cameras, and we're working with police and BSO on the security for this property to make sure, and if anybody, there's a property manager that has a connection with BSO. Eric Carlson can.
Sorry, my name is Eric Carlson with Alliance West Atlantic LLC, the project manager for this project. I guess just a couple points that I wanted to point out. So this project, going back to the tenant mix that I think that you were looking for, this project is designed with the drive-in doors, so that we can have an eclectic mix of users. Internally, it's designed for up to 19 different tenants. There's 19 storefront doors, so which obviously can be expanded if someone wants more than one bay. But tried to make this project very receptive to where we believe the tenants are in the market, and also to provide flexibility for a range of those tenants. So in addition to the drive-in doors, on the north and south end of the property, we actually have dock locations. So if there was a tenant that did have some modest dock high loading, that they would be able to access the building through an internal corridor. But on to your point, Ms. King, on the fencing of the whole property, one of the constraints that we have, there's a couple unique, and you've seen them in the conditions of approval, some unique conditions around access. So one of the unique conditions has to, that we're working through, is with Wawa. When Wawa was approved, there were 2 access easements created to our property through the Wawa. So one of them we're utilizing 100%, and we'll formalize obviously with an agreement with Wawa, is the North Andrews access. So basically where you come in, make the right in, right out into Wawa on North Andrews, we'll be connecting there as well. The more unique situation was when the Wawa was approved, there was some foresight that when our property, this was prior to our ownership, when our property was developed, there would have to be a new formalized driveway. The current condition is kind of ad hoc, or maybe historic is maybe the way to say it. So in working with FDOT, they're understandably concerned about the proximity of, if we wanted to keep our existing curb cut as well as their existing curb cut and the proximity of that. But what was proposed when the Wawa came through was that our we would not have our own driveway on West Atlantic. We would actually bring our traffic through the gas station pumps. So that is why we are proposing to close their West Atlantic access and bring their traffic through our new entrance. So we're showing that on the screen here. But that's one of the reasons that we can't secure the property as much, as because we are bringing Wawa's traffic through our entrance. Secondarily, there's another unique attribute in that there are properties to the north of us, and this is one of the conditions that don't have, they're landlocked parcels. They don't have any right-of-way frontage, and over time they've been using North Andrews, and even prior to North Andrews being built, I think they were accessing Martin Luther King Boulevard as well as West Atlantic to the south. And so while they don't have any frontage, we're respecting what they've been doing the last number of years and providing them access to continue their access to West Atlantic. So, sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but we're mindful of that, but we also have other constraints in respecting the existing neighbors and dealing with the environment around us in terms of the way the Wawa was approved and working through those issues. So
I just want you to be open-minded to that, especially now that you're talking about how it's going to be configured to. To me, that's even better for them to go to Hyde. Would you consider having additional security, maybe at night for your tenants, if there are going to be anybody? I think that'd be, cameras are great, but it's going to be post when the incident happens, unless you're just having somebody real time sitting there looking at a camera, and I doubt it. So they're great for after the fact, but you want to keep your property safe as well. You want to keep good tenants, and it's a struggle for everybody, but at least I think we should be open-minded to let them know that you may have to change some of your security features, as according to what I saw in your septet.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Definitely.
Lewis? I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
I'm done. No, I was done.
I thought you were done.
I was just concurring with her.
Yeah. Mr. Lewis?
You mentioned the access agreement with the Wawa. What is the status of that? Is it already finalized?
Sure. Back up here. Yes, we've gone back and forth 2 or 3 times with Wawa, and I have a draft revision from Wawa in my inbox from last week. So I think that they're cognizant, which is beneficial for me, that that's not a great solution for them either, to have our traffic come, because in effect, it gives us the right to use their current driveway. The easement that was, the cross-access that was created gives us the right to go through their property with tractor, there was no limitation. So I think that they luckily, they see the benefit of this alternative solution, and we're moving forward very smoothly.
Okay, anybody else? I did, so you can get back up. Yeah. I'm assuming you're the person who's in charge of money. So two things. One, I didn't see a detail. It looked like the walls are big enough. Those are going to be precast, or are they?
The screening wall?
Yes.
So the screening wall, it was a bit of conversation with the Architectural Appearance Committee as well. So as designed now, it's a concrete wall. We won't have a specification.
Okay, so it
Specification
could be
for it?
either one. It could be CMUs, or it could be precast, either way.
Yes, sir. There was some conversation from the Architectural Review Committee, and I guess I would put it at the bland appearance of the wall. And so one of our conditions with the Architectural Appearance Committee was to go back to staff and try to find a better solution that might address the visual aspects of it, also concerns with maybe vandalism of it. So we're excited about that opportunity to work with staff to find a solution that is more visually appealing, maybe soft, less in your face.
Okay. Your tenants to the north, your neighbors to the north are municipal, or whatever, they're governmental agencies, aren't they? Or is it the railroad, and it's the county, and?
It's a couple, it's a mixture of tenants. So there is one, I'm assuming is Broward, it is Broward County, but I think it was associated with the domain for Andrews Avenue. Then there's CSX, this is going east to west.
Right.
And there's CSX.
Along the railroad, obviously.
Well, no, they don't.
They're on the inside.
So they're on the inside.
Okay.
It's, how can I point?
So
So
they're the little triangle?
they're like the long, narrow.
Oh, the long skinny.
Yeah, both of them, actually, and the road. They own both parcels. So that triangle parcel is Broward County, and then to the west is a long skinny parcel, and then to the west of that is like a road with a grassy, that's
Right.
all of CSX's property.
Oh, and then
then
the other one's a private property owner
Those two are
along the
private
rail.
property, and they do not have any legal access,
That's
those two
exciting.
properties. Three properties to the north,
Oh,
right?
three separate owners going along the rail, yeah.
Yeah,
So their frontage is CSX.
yeah.
Or that's how
I
they
understand.
take
Their
their-
west boundary is CSX, is what you're saying.
And the east
And the
boundary.
east boundary.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, CSX property. One of them's the railroad, the physical railroad, and one of them's railroad property, is what you're saying. That is really strange, how the railroad ended up with severed property.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they're, like I said, they don't have legal access. So we are actually providing them an easement through our property to get them down to West Atlantic. If they don't want to use the north to go to Andrews.
Okay.
Right, so there are no easements, well, our understanding is that there are no recorded easements providing access, even reservations and deeds.
Okay.
Despite, and I will point out, if you go look at, what is it, the Broward County Assessor's website, it does name a 13th, or Northwest 13th Avenue, but we've been unable to find any records of what that would be.
Oh.
Or of any paper streets or any opening of streets. So that relates back to the condition of, providing,
obviously
making sure that these people aren't, our neighbors to the north aren't being
Yeah.
any significant detriment to their functionality of their businesses because of our development. There's a lot of interesting access title issues with this.
A lot of that probably got created by the fact that DOT put an angled bridge across that across MLK, so
There was lots of
as
access.
part of the extension of the Andrews Extension and Military Trail connection. Yeah, they left a few little,
some
little
open
problems behind them when they left, but I don't want to complain too much because I work for them as a consultant half the time, so. Anyway, the other thing that is of a little concern to me is, now I saw the landscape plan, and generally it's a fairly aggressive plan, and I think it probably was all tied in with the fact that you had to buffer the road, Andrews Extension, because we have a visual thing where we don't allow your tractor trailer or your doors looking in that direction, which I think is a good thing, but you came up with a reasonably good solution for that. But one of the things that happens, so when you do the tie-in down at the west end of the Wawa property, okay, so one of the things that somebody on this board, I won't tell you who it is, somebody on this board made Wawa, Wawa agreed to put their oak trees, they agreed to upgrade the size of them to 20 feet, okay? Because we wanted Andrews, not along the Andrews Extension, but along Atlantic Boulevard only, because we consider that for us, an important major corridor. I see that you have 16-foot trees along that area. I would really like to see only on that elevation, not the other, whatever it is, 75 trees you have on your property, but just along the ones along there, instead of going in with 16-foot trees. I think it would be good so that you can match the size of those trees with Wawa, because you're going to actually, it's to the east of where those 4 trees that are on this particular, you have like 4 dark trees, the red, whatever it is, purplish red. What trees were those? Are those the, I think those are the, not royal poincianas, it's a different type of, it's the yellow one, I think, right?
Hi, Brett Waldman, landscape architect with Bowler. Speaking with urban forestry, we proposed, I believe they're yellow poincianas.
Yeah.
So there's a consistency with the street theme, as it was discussed. Again.
With the what?
There was a theme, if you will, extending further out. I believe it was to the west of our site, where there's a continuation of this species of tree. So in discussion with them, we proposed that species.
Sure. And I have no problem with that. It's beautiful trees. I mean, they are beautiful. My point is that the Wawa trees that are along the right-of-way there are 20, they came in at 20 feet, okay?
So you're just looking for...
So I'm looking, yeah, instead of having, I think there were 16s on your spec, just that line of trees, I think if I'm counting right, there's probably about 9 of them total along. There was 4 on the Wawa side of the driveway and 5 on the other side in front of the pond. If those could come in at 20 feet, it would look more balanced with just those 9, not the other. You got a zillion other trees on your site. But I'm looking to try to make the right of way look consistent, because you're getting ready to go in with no, I don't mean this negatively, but you're getting ready to rearrange their entry, and it's going to become like one piece of property, almost, in terms, and I'd like to see the size of the trees to be similar, across there, so.
It shouldn't be an issue, too.
Okay.
We can work.
I know they're more expensive, but I mean, I just think it'll look better if you have 20-foot trees all the way, at one time.
It's understood. We'll work with urban forestry.
Okay. And that would be great if we could do that. As a matter of fact, I'd like to put it in at least as a condition to say that you'll work with urban forestry to try to do a balancing, because you may or may not be even done with the Wawa situation until you're done with your agreement with Wawa, in case there's something else that they want. Although Mr. Backman's usually he's a pretty reasonable guy. He tries to work. No, you don't think he is? Okay.
No, I love
Yeah, no, I'm sure he probably wants, his client will want to.
Mr. Stacer, I'm very happy to work with Urban Forestry to
Okay.
get the sizing right to.
Yeah, and
I'm very appreciative of your comment of getting the streetscape to look as consistent as possible. So that's something that we can very strongly look at.
super, okay. Does anybody else have anything that they want to talk about? If not, is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll have close the public hearing. And if there aren't any other comments or questions, they agreed to the 6 conditions of staff, plus I guess we're going to add one for that other line of trees, if whoever makes that.
Chair,
Yes, Ms.
are we also adding something to the conditions about the structure of the wall that was discussed?
I'm not too concerned about, what was, I don't think so. I think they're just working on it.
Sorry, Heidi Davis again. It's already in the AAC condition,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
PNC doesn't have to. We'll address it as a result of the AAC
Okay.
condition.
And I wasn't really actually concerned about whether it was I was just asking whether it was or wasn't, and it doesn't really matter to me. I just, whatever.
But, Mr.
Mrs.
Chairman,
Coleman,
I
yeah.
looked at that after the comments came out, and it reminded me of what happened at the tunnel this week. That is a big, white canvas. It's a beautiful wall, but it's a big, white canvas.
Yes, and we're going to work on, with staff, architectural features. We may break it up a little bit with some fence, some wall, so it's not just this big, huge sheer wall. It was something that we didn't want to do. We were pressing on, we'll do double landscaping, we'll do, fencing with both sides, and we'll do whatever, but this 10-foot concrete wall, which I don't think is as, aesthetically pleasing as what you would like or anybody else would like, but that's what it is.
Great.
So we'll make it the best that we can.
Well, it's a beautiful proposal, and I'd hate to see it graffitied.
I do have one other question. I was looking at, having built several industrial buildings, it looked like you had, the way that you're going to lay this out, there's actually an interior corridor in between the front and back bays?
That's right. As we were working through the multiple iterations of the site plan, we encountered a number of constraints that we've discussed, and because of and Miguel is here. He is our architect with Corrales, but my understanding is that there is it's a health, life, and safety concern about your distance from
exiting.
And because the building was so deep, it needed a corridor, and so we were able to. That's where those loading docks came into place. Is that if someone needed a loading dock and needed a forklift, they could use the corridor. It's also, in addition to safety, it's presumably it's access to the rear of the bays. So. Tried to find a way to, as a site plan, change the building. Maybe we're just justifying it to ourselves, but we.
No, I mean, I have never, I mean, I don't know how many industrial buildings I've built, but it was the first time I'd ever seen one. Of course, you've got a deep building, I understand that. So you got to look at your tenant size or your tenants and whatever, so I mean.
That's right.
I just was curious if have you done that? Have you split the building?
We haven't. No, we haven't. But we've been working. We have relationships in the market with brokers, and they're comfortable with this design. But it was, as we were working through the plan, there were 2 building concepts. And stormwater and all those things, and then the building merged together, and then we found ways to take that situation, and we think that it's a good opportunity for some of the tenants that. Drive in most, 95% of the time, and they might need a dock high, 5% of the time, and then they have access to their space. So.
Okay, no, I just, thank you. Thanks for the information. Okay. With that, I think the chair will entertain a motion unless there's any other questions on item number 1.
Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Coleman?
I'd like to make a motion as follows. The board finds that competent and substantial evidence has been presented satisfying the review standards for this major site plan approval, and as requested this application, and therefore I move approval of this item with the 1 through 6, A through D, and a new 7 condition dealing with working with the city arborist or urban forester on increasing and blending the heights of those trees on Atlantic Boulevard only.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Comments? Yes,
Wanted to
Mrs.
clarify,
Coleman?
it's the 9 trees.
9 trees. I knew that you were going to do that when I
Oh, well,
left it
that's
out.
true. There was
Yeah.
smaller
I knew
trees.
you were gonna do that
too,
when
so
I left
that's
it out.
fair. That's a fair, definitely fair.
Okay, other conditions are included in the staff report.
Okay. Is that it? Anybody else? Questions? No? Bobby, call the roll on item number 1.
Carla Coleman?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we not have a second?
Yes,
No,
Richard.
Mr. Kloskowitz.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, that's all right.
Yes.
Okay. Richard Kloskowitz?
Yes.
Joan Kovac?
Yes.
Tundra King?
Yes.
Derek Lewis?
Yes.
Darlene Smith?
Yes.
Fred Stacer?
Yes. Good luck.
Thank you very
With your
much,
project.
everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
It is a really nice-looking project. Who signs?
That's hard because we don't allow them to put those, doors in. Okay. Item number 2 is a text amendment, DPOD height bonus for public parking. Mr. Weems, this is your artwork, sir.
Okay, now that it's just family.
Just
Good
the
evening
family
again,
arguments,
Max
okay.
Weems Development Services. Mid-November, the city manager's office conducted a study for parking that demonstrated the parking deficiencies in Old Town, generally the east side of the zoning district, the downtown Pompano overlay district. While recognizing these parking deficiencies, we also want to encourage the historic preservation of this district, the active street frontages. Generally, we want to encourage structured, centralized, and shared parking in this district. The vision in downtown or downtown adjacent, Old Town, whatever you want to call it. And so in order to accommodate that, the form of development that we have entitled through the zoning and the land use, it will require a lot of parking. So we want to be able to encourage the existing and smaller infill development to be able to lease spaces within garages so that on-site parking wouldn't be required for these as they occur, so that you don't have to have a majority of your lot consumed by surface or other parking. And obviously, if we're asking larger private development to incorporate public parking into their structures, this would eat into their bottom line, reducing otherwise habitable spaces by filling the building envelope with parking spaces that we are looking to encourage. The rational solution would be to provide height bonuses for those developments that do provide a minimum number of parking spaces available for lease by the city to operate as shared public parking. So this was generally the task. How can we create an environment that supports the number of parking spaces that we need and require, and also encourage private development to provide this on our behalf? If we are establishing a minimum number of parking spaces to be dedicated to public parking, right now we're proposing 100 spaces, we need to provide a minimum of 2 floors of additional height. We kind of asked around, if we were to ask for 100 spaces, how much of your building would that consume? And 2 floors was generally the answer that we received. Beyond 2 floors, the optics of giving away too much height may create difficulty in approving this amendment. But in reality, we aren't giving anything away because that additional space that they will be receiving would be occupied by public parking that would be reserved for public use. From an outside perspective, this would create taller buildings, up to 24 feet is what we're proposing. which may not be desired to all, but personally I feel that 2 floors on top of a 10 or 12-story building is a negligible effect on the ground experience or to the adjacent property owners. So here I want to show the existing sub-areas regulating plan. The dark blue and the dark blue hatch are the core and center sub-areas of the downtown Pompano overlay district. These are the districts in which we are seeking to limit this incentive to. Additionally, here I have the height regulating plan, which shows the dark red, almost maroon, where 105 feet is permitted, and the red, where a maximum of 80 feet is permitted. That is generally consistent with the same boundaries of the core and center sub-area. So just to be clear, we're talking about buildings that are permitted today to 80 or 105 feet, where this incentive is proposed to be permitted. So this may be used in combination with other existing height bonuses, as it isn't exactly fair to provide 2 stories for height bonus, but not really get to use that for any actual habitable space or profit, which developers seek. And other, they'll be providing other public benefits in order to receive those bonuses. So, of course, through the terms of the lease that we may execute with these developers, there will be some income for these property owners. But most importantly, this is solving a problem for the city where our ability to build a parking garage on land we may or may not own it's much more challenging than having a developer who already has an active application for development of this magnitude, which likely already includes structured parking, to incorporate that into their project. So this is being presented as what I think is a reasonable solution to the problem of parking shortages in the near and long term, as well as the issue for paying for construction for the city constructing a standalone public parking garage. However, if you're generally uncomfortable with the concept of height, this might not seem reasonable to you, but that being said, these heights are already permitted in this district up to 105 feet. So that might feel unreasonable to that same audience. The full text of the amendment is provided in the backup and is consistent with the summary that I've provided. Here tonight we also have Suzette Sybil, Assistant City Manager, Jeff Lance, Parking Manager, Chris Brown, Parking and Real Estate Consultant. This text amendment has been prepared by Development Services and received a recommendation from the Economic Development Council. And I'm providing a recommended motion for you to consider. Should you have any questions about the ordinance or the text, I'm available to answer those. And should you have any questions about the study or the parking deficiencies, the appropriate people are here to answer those questions as well. This concludes my presentation.
Okay. So are you all going to, guys want to talk, or are you just here for answering questions? Or?
We're here for questions.
Only? Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So does anybody have any questions of staff?
Several.
Yes. Mrs. Coleman.
First, I want to commend you for the study because a long-term parking plan is one of the issues that the Multimodal Task Force identified last summer in its recommendations. But I do have, and this is a very creative way to deal with it, the height doesn't bother me. The not having control of location bothers me more. In the backup, it made clear that you don't have to grant this and you don't have to lease every place. But without more information on what those leases are going to be and whether they're going to cover costs or whether we're going to be taking money to pay developers for parking we don't use in locations we didn't choose, can you make me a little bit more comfortable with that? Has somebody else tried this someplace else and it's worked?
Sure. So the way that it's crafted in the incentive, it is pretty general, but it is specific to say that a lease agreement with the city and at the discretion of the city is required.
Right.
So you can't have a developer just come in and say, I'm going to do public parking, therefore I get 24 additional feet. It has to be in agreement with the city. So there is some control over those locations where we want this public parking. Obviously, if the city's not going to enter into an agreement for that, the development services isn't going to grant the bonus. About the structure or the nature of the agreements, I can't really speak too much to that.
Thank you, Max. So again, Susan Civil Assistant City Manager. So exactly what Max summarized. The control really stays with the city, right? We imagine that we would want to have these discussions with the developer earlier on in their process as they're planning out their projects, making a determination. So having the text code amendment move forward and pass allows us to at least start that conversation. It's certainly up to us if we want to agree, if we want to put the public parking in private developments. And then certainly, right, negotiating the terms of a lease would be important. We certainly want them to build it, spend that upfront costs. We'll work together on what it would cost to operate those public parking spaces. Obviously, there's parking revenues to be had. So we would look at all of those numbers, bake it in, and try to figure out what this developer is willing to charge us on an annual basis for that lease. And if it makes sense to us, it's the right location, it's the right fit, based on where we're at that point in our parking kind of development plans as we're moving forward with the downtown and everything else going on. Because again, we can't tell you the timing for these projects at this point. There's a lot of ifs still, right? So, but we're still in control. We would still have to go through a due diligence. Every lease agreement for consideration would have to come back to the city commission for consideration at that time, and they would get a chance to see whatever terms we're proposing and our basis for reaching that conclusion.
Do you have any idea at this point how long that lease would be?
Well, right now, what we put in there is 50 years, that they would have to be agreeable to that term for them to get this done, because, obviously if they're making this investment to build the infrastructure and we're making this investment with them, we want to ensure that it's a long-term agreement, right? That it's not like a 10-year lease where they're gonna say, oh, bye, thank you, we're not gonna renew, or we're gonna try to renegotiate things. So we're trying to lock things in kind of long-term. We realize all the development going on in the downtown, inclusive of the new downtown, like we discussed last night at the commission meeting. So it's really a cohesive plan to try to look at everything cohesively. We're always trying to find temporary solutions and long-term solutions for parking. We've been fortunate that the private sector has been a great partner, particularly in the east, which is where we've been focused mostly before. With all the development happening west now, we're starting to shift our attention to the west. And we've always had plans to put garages on the west side, don't get me wrong. But now, as things are morphing and moving and developing, we're trying to basically fit and figure out how we make that happen. And this is just another tool in the toolbox. We have other things going on that eventually will come to fruition if they come to life, whether it's dealing with the church in Old Town or things like that. We're having those conversations, but we don't have any decisions on that yet. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. Again, it's just another tool to allow us to be able to accommodate that parking supply based on demand. And one of the things we talked about in the memo too, as well, is that, we don't want to invest in building a garage before all that demand in Old Town comes to fruition, right? We expect it's going to grow as a few restaurants start to open. So this allows us to kind of slowly ramp up by adding that parking with the private sector slowly, and then eventually as we kind of bake longer term plans to maybe build a garage.
Well, 50 years is a pretty long-term plan.
For the lease, it is, yes.
Well, I mean, that lease maybe that horizon, maybe you may decide that that's not a horizon you want to stick with, but that's down the road. We want to give you the tools to do what is necessary to do. Has this been tried in any other place?
Address that? I'll let Mr.
I just want to say one thing. Mrs. Coleman, thank you for your question. My name is Chris Brown. I'm a parking and real estate consultant for both the CRA and the city of Pompano Beach. And parking is a specialty of mine. It's been for 20 or 30 years. And I just want to, has it ever been done anywhere else? Yes, in many cities, like the city of Boulder, they have lots of small garages, and they don't want large buildings. The city of Naples is another one. They put small garages, much smaller than what we built at the pier. We built a 625-space garage. But there are cities that do small garages, so they don't look so overpowering to the community or to the downtown. So this is a way of, when you put the 100 to 150 spaces in a multifamily building, you disguise it, you don't even see it. And then but it does provide public parking. One thing that's really important to note, and we experienced this at the pier, is that if we didn't build the pier garage, and we built the pier garage because of the beach demand, but if we didn't build the pier garage, we would not have what we have out there now as a pretty major entertainment location. So you have to build it, and I remember, and all of you probably did experience this likewise, there were critics of the pier garage. Oh, they'll never fill it up. It opened on July 4th,
Yes, there were.
2016. By July 4th, 2019, we were full. We were at capacity, and we knew we had to build a second garage. So we're going to come before you pretty soon this year and for our second garage, and that's going to be a pretty large garage probably with a hotel with it. So anyway, parking, you have to be way ahead of the curve on parking and ahead of the demand. I ran the parking, for example, in the downtown of Delray. I always tried to be 2 years ahead of what I thought was demand. And we would do a parking study every year, check demand, and of course, if you've been to Delray, you know the demand's out. They haven't kept up. They need me back. And I could build 2 more garages there, but in any case, you always have to be ahead. But remember, if you don't build it, nobody will come. So you have to take the chance, and you have to have the belief in redevelopment. And by God, I think we in Pompano, we believe in redevelopment.
We certainly do.
Quality redevelopment.
We certainly do. Thank you.
Add one additional thing I was just thinking as well, because we're looking to the private sector to finance, right, the construction as opposed to us, usually for them to get underwriting too, usually because it's tied to us making a payment to them, I would imagine, I can't speak for them, but based on my discussions over past years on some of our beach projects, I would imagine they would want to see a long lease term, right? 50 years minimum, sometimes they like 99 years, which our code doesn't allow right now, but just wanted to add that.
Well, 99, you own it. Thank you.
Sure.
We look forward to seeing how this turns out.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? I did have one logistical question. Obviously, the way that I see it, obviously the developer's not going to go out and design a building that's got 2 extra floors of parking unless he's got a solid deal with the city. So it seems like to me that nobody's, at the time they're actually acquiring land, those guys are going to make that deal very early on with the city. It's not going to be something that you're going to be like in the middle of this deal and then you're going to do it. They're either going to know that they've got the city on the hook for a certain amount of money and they know what that return is going to be to them, or it's not. And one of the things that I've said to the commissioners that I've talked to so far is that it seems like to me that they obviously have the ultimate control. If they do not want parking in that location, they're just going to say, I don't care what the lease says, don't bring it to me. So I think that's the real protection. Now, it's not going to be a protection at our level because by the time it comes here, that deal will have been made at the commission level and it'll come to us. So I've tried to assure them that, I don't see a downside to for them. They're not giving up any control because they make the decision right in the very beginning. So I'm extremely comfortable, and besides which, I've been known to tell the commissioners when I thought they were wrong. That's happened maybe once or something, whenever. But if you were feeling that was the wrong location, I think that they would sit and listen to what you had to say, Mrs.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm comfortable with how the city is looking at pulling this together, and that and understand a little bit more about the ins and outs of how you see it work. But I think that the more creative we can be, the better off we are. And Chris is absolutely right about staying ahead of the curve here under the parking.
Well, and the other thing is, and Mr. Brown and I have talked about this a lot, that, as he just said, that deal, that beach wouldn't be what it is if we didn't go and make that massive investment, you know. And we don't want to have to be the ones. Now, we already have stuff going on in Old Town and in the downtown area, so I think it's actually way more appropriate there. We could not have made that kind of deal on the beach. We'd still be going, wow, that's a really ugly pier, you know? But I think here it's way more appropriate. It also cuts down the amount of potential, need for a massive city investment, you know, and it can be done. And if as it spreads out into the other side of the downtown area, I think they will also be much more appropriately placed. You know, instead of having one central large garage that's 1,000 things and you got to walk everywhere else in downtown.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out with signage and rates and, you know, all of that sort of thing as it comes about. It's, you know, no good deed goes unpunished here. It's really going to be an exciting way to see this go forward.
I also think that if you look at downtown Fort Lauderdale, now that it's really booming and there's a lot going on, that 2-block garage that they have that's kind of behind the library and whatever, and over a block, now that property is incredibly valuable. But what would they do if they tear that garage out? You know, that would, so basically you make feral land out of something, and then we don't want to be competing with our developers for land. And we don't want to be taking those prime spots of land. We want to share it with them. And I think it's just an outstanding way to do it. I'm obviously pretty excited about it. So anyway, anybody else?
I just have one comment.
Yes, Mrs.
Talking about having the smaller garages, it makes us a more hometown feel and more pedestrian friendly, in my opinion. That's what we want in the downtown, Old Town area, is that feel. I think.
Yeah.
Good job. As the EDC said the other day, Max, that was a really great idea that you guys have come up with.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion on this item. Item number 2.
Chair, I'll make a motion.
Yes, Mrs.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the text amendment to the City Commission for their consideration for the height bonus for public parking.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Okay. Bobby, call the roll on item number 2.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 3. Max and his turtles.
Yeah, this one's a feel good.
One of my favorite stories of the beach is when, I got to say this before he starts. One of my favorite stories on the beach was when Horatio was telling us about the inspection with the guy from the state, the DEP, the turtle dude from the state, and they were literally laying on the sand. And the guy was like, you got to look at it like what the turtle sees. And Horatio, being the engineer that he is, he's like, okay, if you say so, we'll do this, you know? He was like, didn't study that in engineering school, but that's okay. Anyway, go ahead, Max.
Thank you. It's a good visual. Okay, so once again, I'm Max Weems with Development Services. This is to review a text amendment proposal for a sea turtle lighting ordinance. Now, the city already has a sea turtle ordinance. It's called Marine Turtle Protection Ordinance. And I don't know, the state released this model ordinance. It was much more specific. It addressed things that our code didn't. I did attempt to strike through an underline of our existing ordinance, but in the end I decided, look, if they're going to release a model every other, city ideally will adopt the same model. We'll have consistent codes for our beach developers, and should it evolve, it'll be easy to amend. So that's why this is a little bit unusual than to other section amendments. It's a complete strike and a new section proposed. So in the spring of 2023, we attended a workshop hosted by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission in partnership with Sea Turtle Conservancy. It was intended for sea turtle lighting plan reviewers, which we've never called ourselves, but I suppose we are. A portion of the workshop highlighted a program of the Sea Turtle Conservancy's lighting team, which assists local governments with updating their ordinances. So clearly we took advantage of that, and we have chosen to base our proposed ordinance on that model ordinance. And then that's what I just said. So that being said, why do lighting ordinances matter? I think that we all probably care about the sea turtles and the protection of the sea turtles, and have some general understanding that lighting is bad for them. But not all lighting is bad for them, and it can be done in ways that is that they are comfortable with. So just to give some background on some sea turtles. In Florida, our sea turtles are the loggerheads, the greens, and the leatherbacks. Recently, I went to the Sea Turtle Hospital in the North Keys, which if you haven't been to, it was a really great experience, so I'd strongly encourage that. They have tons of turtles that they're rehabbing, some that they keep forever, but it was just a really nice experience to see how they have that there in the Keys. We have the largest loggerhead nesting population in the world, so therefore what happens on our beaches is extremely critical to the nesting behavior and the world's population of these turtles. So that's why it's critical to do what we can. The results of excess artificial lighting is twofold. Nesting turtles may emerge onto an excessively lit beach and choose to turn around because they can't tell where the dunes are the appropriate location. They rely on the contrast between the relatively darkened dunes and the brighter ocean to identify those suitable nesting locations. Additionally, hatchlings may suffer an equally confusing fate when trying to reach the water. Excess landward lighting, artificial lighting can disorient the hatchlings, resulting in them heading in the wrong direction or wandering the beach for a longer time than necessary, increasing their exposure to predators. So the example photo there is of a condominium with what we would identify as excess artificial lighting that's clearly visible from the beach. So as we know, short wavelength light disorients sea turtles. This figure demonstrates how sea turtles are attracted to different wavelengths of light. Each line represents a different species and the proportion of hatchlings that are attracted to specific wavelengths of light. As you can see, all 4 species have a 100% attraction rate when they are exposed to short wavelength light. The attraction rate goes down as the wavelength increases, so this is why our ordinance proposes to use long wavelength light to retrofit beachfront properties, well, and for new development. The state of Florida, in partnership with these technical advisors, determined that using the keep it low, keep it shielded, and keep it long philosophy for ordinances was the best approach in reducing light's impact on sea turtles and the best way to mitigate the problematic lighting. So this bollard is an example of keeping it low, keeping it shielded, and of the right long wavelength. The proposed ordinance also proposes to establish a Sea Turtle Trust Fund funded by code enforcement violations to the Sea Turtle Lighting Ordinance. That would provide assistance for existing property owners to comply at the discretion of our Code Compliance Division, to educational materials and awareness campaigns, to related research and conservation projects, and for equipment or materials to assist in code compliance. The draft ordinance has been reviewed by the Sea Turtle Conservancy Lighting Team, the Economic Development Council, the Florida Power and Light, all of which have recommended the ordinance without objection. Proposed amendments are supported by our comprehensive plan, do not create conflict with our code of ordinances, and are consistent with our zoning code otherwise. So the full text is available within the backup and is consistent with the summary that I provided in my presentation. Here tonight we do have Mario Sotolongo, the Code Compliance Director. He's available for questions, doesn't have presentation. And this text amendment has been prepared by Development Services, and yeah, we of course recommend approval. So there is a recommended motion. If you have any questions on the text, I'm available, and of course, so is Mario.
Okay. Anybody have, yes, Mrs. Coleman?
Of course I do.
Go ahead.
Have you talked to any developers about this change?
We have talked with a developer with an active application, and so they are aware of this change. But to be clear, this isn't so different from our existing ordinance, except that it specifies the specific wavelength that we are looking for, and it provides variations in the types of bulbs that are permitted. Before, it was much more generous in terms of saying amber is what we were looking for, but in fact, amber isn't necessarily a wavelength, but a color. And so it's not going to create a rupture in terms of the developments that we have in the pipeline or any new development in terms of these new standards.
Well, was there a particular reason why the incentives were deleted?
So that is yes, that was feedback that I received from code compliance when I needed to upload this to Granicus for routing. The latest version does not strike. I'm assuming that you're referring specifically to the allowance for the fee to be used to retrofit existing properties.
Well, I just noticed that anything dealing with incentives had been deleted out of the ordinance.
Oh, from the existing ordinance. No, there isn't a specific reason except to say that that section has never really been used.
Nobody's ever bit on the incentives.
Correct.
Okay, that's a good reason to delete it. We are all very, one of the cars in my household even has a sea turtle plate, so we're all supporters of the sea turtle. I am concerned, especially with the change to the amber lighting, about frequency of placement of lights on a safety issue. Because so many of our folks, especially in the beach developments, are older, whose eyesight is not what it once was. I don't know that much about the lumens that come out of these things. And is there any thought placed on whether we need to be cognizant of the frequency of the placement of lights, shorten that distance with the changes we've made? Or can you tell us that, no, it throws off as much light as for those sorts of uses, for safety uses, as it once did?
Yeah, so kind of two answers to that.
Okay.
The lumens, if reduced, we still have our minimum foot candle requirement. So if the result is an increase in the frequency of lighting, then that is the result. But the reality is that the lighting is not necessarily darker to our experience. It's a different color. It's less intense. It's not going to be higher, so it might feel darker because you're not seeing it reflected on things, but the ground is equally illuminated, just in a amber color, a different wavelength.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope. Nobody in the audience wants to speak on this. We'll move on. The chair will entertain a motion on item number 3.
I have a motion.
Yes, Mr.
I'd move that we submit this for approval, the text amendment as it relates to sea turtle lighting ordinance as amended to the City Commission for their consideration.
Yep. A motion.
Second.
And a second. A motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? If not, Bobby, call the roll on item number 3, please.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Sandra King,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 4, landscape revision and dune enhancement. Max, you are up.
Okay, good evening once again. Max Weems, Development Services. This is to review text amendment for landscaping revisions and dune enhancements that are in Chapter 155, Articles 2 and 5. The Planning and Zoning Division and Urban Forestry, we've maintained a list of desired code amendments for quite some time now. We've been compiling it for, honestly, it's been like maybe 2 or 3 years. And some things get slipped through into other text amendments, but this is generally everything that was left over that we still felt like was a good idea. So the purpose of the amendments is to clarify things that are already required by the code, some of those things that we, how we read the code, but maybe everyone's not reading it this way, to introduce the expected industry standards and learn best practices, to adjust to some changes in the state statutes, and to establish a new section on beach dune management, restoration, and enhancement. Generally, the revisions consist of small tweaks, which are kind of negligible corrections that are just staff preferences to things like terms and grammar. We've added an administrative adjustment to reflect staff's preferred practice of amending vehicular use areas, landscaping that's required to receive superior landscaping in lieu of. So right now we have a requirement that there's a depth of landscaping adjacent to the front of a building that is determined based on the height of that building. So the landscaping in front of a building is based on that height. That is a frequent issue based on lot characteristics, the drive aisle and parking locations, and sometimes staff may agree that that should be reduced, but we find it a little bit inconsistent with our code to just sort of wave a magic wand and say, oh, you did superior landscaping over here, so we'll just kind of call it even. Now we're just codifying that. We've created alternatives for canopy trees where canopy trees simply aren't feasible. We often get requests from developers, oh, how about if I do understory or like 3 palm trees in lieu of 1 canopy tree? And while that may not be the immediate preferences of staff, sometimes it's just unfeasible to provide a canopy tree where it would otherwise be required. So now we have a very clear, in lieu of, where not feasible, a minimum of 3 palm trees is the alternative. We've added requirements for root barrier systems and requirements for sufficient soil volumes. These are 2 things that we're pretty excited about because we'll often get, oh, I can't install that tree there, it's going to rip up the pavement. Well, not if you used a root barrier system, or over time this might create a problem for our public right-of-ways, and so we'll just ensure that where we want a specific tree species, that those roots aren't something that will become interfering with other infrastructure. And the canopy volume, or the soil volumes is also crucial for us to get things like suspended pavement systems. If, in another example, if you had something like a paved area, a sidewalk or drive aisle adjacent to a location where we desired a canopy tree, you could provide suspended pavement systems where the roots extend under those infrastructure, but that soil volume is what's triggering that. So if this tree species is one that requires a significant soil volume, but you don't have it in the pit that exists, you're going to have to do something like a suspended pavement system or other alternative like this. So this mechanism is enabling us to, 1, keep the large trees and obtain the soil volumes to secure their survivability. We've also added the ability to relocate trees off-site, both to private properties and to public properties. So if a vacant site is being developed and there's specimen trees on the property that either the city or other private property desires, or that we aren't interested in having them just get rid of because they want to develop, we have a mechanism for relocating those trees either on public property or private property where visible to the public realm. So not just, oh, I want to get rid of this tree, let me stick it behind something. No, it needs to be in a place where it can be enjoyed by the public. We've clarified the way that we calculate tree mitigation and replacement, which was something that we were practicing anyways, but now it's very clear in our code. And we've added the re-review and expired permit fees, which is something that we've wanted to do for a long time, but now we can do. While on that point, I did notice in the backup that anytime I put something in a table in Granicus, it sort of squishes it and makes it illegible. So I did create a handout which has that if you want to pass that around. So that That is what is intended for the backup. It's just illegible on what was provided in Granicus. Did you? Oh, thank you. So, for example of the things that I was describing, this is a graphic that demonstrates how a root barrier would exist adjacent to paved areas, either in a tree pit or like something paved like a right-of-way or sidewalk. This is a graphic that we'll be inserting into our code to explain these concepts. Additionally, this is the graph that we are proposing for how to determine the required soil volume. So you can see that as the tree size goes up, so does that soil volume. This is a graph that we've already incorporated into our transit-oriented overlay district with success in obtaining suspended pavement systems. But now we would like to apply it in our general code just because it has worked well and it makes sense to us. Like I said, we've also introduced this dune management section to the landscape code. So with that, we've established the applicability as to, generally it says where dunes exist, they should be required. It doesn't have to be in the same location, but it can be shifted on the site and built back with a minimum expectation of height and pitch and species that are provided and material. That section also details how to mitigate invasive exotic species and how they should be removed from the site, all of these things. And we've provided a section for the very specific restoration enhancements when required. Like I said, things like location, height, the contents of the dune, and the best practices. This section, I didn't just make it up. It does follow the guidance that we received from the Coastal Construction Control Line Program of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, who reviews our beach, anything seaward of Coastal Construction Control Line anyways. So this puts us in line with them and ensures that what they would ultimately be looking for is required in our code. The full text is provided within the backup and is consistent with the summary that I've provided in my presentation. Here tonight we also have Wade Collum, our urban forester, and like the others, this text has been prepared by Development Services and received the recommendation from the Economic Development Council. And for you there is a recommended motion, should you need it. I'm available for questions, and so is Wade.
Okay. Questions, Mrs. Coleman?
Is there a reason you removed landscape architect from the approval process?
Ms. Coleman, just into the microphone.
I'm sorry. Is there a reason you removed landscape architect from the approval process here?
Wade, speak.
Good evening, Wade Collum, urban forester with the city of Pompano Beach. We are finding that the difficulty between landscape architects and ISA certified arborists to perform the appraisals is causing some different values to come back, causing a delay in approvals for permitting. The same way I wouldn't want, or staff wouldn't prefer an arborist, although they know a lot about trees, to perform landscape architecture roles. Landscape architecture, while they're good at managing new development, sometimes they are not well versed in the nomenclature and process of evaluating trees based on their existing condition as a mature tree.
I can understand that there may be with some, but I just have a real problem taking that kind of professional out of the chain here. Is it? I'm trying to remember because we've gone over so many texts tonight. I made a few notes, but the first place I noticed the removal of landscape architect was for the single-family home removal pruning permit. And
It's never been required for a single-family home to be drawn by a landscape architect in our code.
no, you removed landscape architect from I'll go back and look at the text, but I believe that that you did remove landscape architect from that and said it had to be an arborist, not a landscape architect, and the old code had both.
So Just to clarify, we're not saying that you cannot be a landscape architect. We're saying that you must be ISA certified arborist. So a landscape architect may be a certified arborist, but that is the baseline to qualify for a tree permit. And a tree permit may be required for a single-family home, but this is just for all tree permits.
I know. I still have a problem with
So
that.
to be clear, it's not for permitting, it's not for drawing plans. It's for the part of the process that requires them to go out and establish a value of the existing trees on a property for the tree survey.
That is the only place that you've removed landscape architecture
Correct.
throughout this.
Correct. And there's.
Not reading it the way you're reading it.
Okay, and just for the record, there is a huge movement in landscape architecture for them to become certified arborists. The majority of the landscape architects we deal with now are also ISA certified arborists.
Well, I'm just a great believer in qualified landscape architects and do not want to take them out of the process here.
God, no. That is not the intent. The intent is to streamline the process and make that process more easy to approve on the first go-around as opposed to reiterations of the appraisal process.
I don't know the ins and outs of this code like you guys do, but I have another question in that, do we have any requirement that the developer and the architect ever look at trees as existing conditions on sites?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
As existing conditions. Max, I think you were alluding to that when you talked about the ability now to relocate trees. But I see, especially with the redevelopment that we have going on now, they just go in and level the lot without thinking about some of these really beautiful trees as existing conditions and designing around them.
Sure. So the tree appraisal that we're referring to is basically that. It's required for any, if it's a major site plan,
Okay.
with the landscape plan, they'll say, okay, these are the trees that we're removing, but we require that there's a value that is tied to any of those trees, and the plan, whatever plan they're proposing, it's either going to include relocates, which could be on-site. We prefer them to be on-site. But now we've also created this mechanism for the relocation of those trees, if we think that they're worth saving, to be off-site.
Well, I guess maybe part of my angst here is that in neighborhoods like mine where there's so much redevelopment and they come in and knock down, trust me when I tell you, what it says in the code and what we are doing are two different things.
Help me to understand what you just said so that I can hear you better. Because listen,
And I know,
I am the last one. I'm like this close to chaining myself to trees, and we of course, we don't want to do that. There's such a push for, they've said to us many times, we've tried to create incentives and compromises for them to keep large trees.
Yeah.
They say the same thing. We have an algorithm that says we must maximize every space possible despite our incentives and our urging for them, because they just need all that space. So this is a solution to help at least they can relocate it to a park or to a private property or to someone who's willing to take it, and at least we get to keep the tree. Because I, like you, I will leave town when they're clearing the lot because it's very difficult for me to see. So we're thinking that this is a possible positive solution to at least try to keep some large mature trees.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, anybody else?
So who would pay for this relocation? So if the developer would have to pay to relocate it to said private property or
So
public?
that's why the appraisals are so important, because it gives us an ability to say, you are now responsible for this kind of like basket of damage that you've done to this property in terms of removing canopy or trees. And so if the mitigation package that we present as like their, this is how we will accept your plan, can include relocation kind of as on-site as A, off-site as B, and then last resort is a fee into the Tree Canopy Trust Fund. But that's not our preference. Of course, it's good to have the money, but that's not our preference here. So this now creates a way to preserve canopy in the city. Wait, was that your question?
Yeah, so I'm like Ms. Carla, so have you seen in all this development, which has been a lot, that prior to it even coming to us, so you give them a layout of these trees can be preserved and this tree is worth, I mean, I'm not an arborist, I can't even grow dirt, but is there something that the developer will know that this tree looks like it costs set amount of money because it's a palm, it's a this, so they know that in advance, and then what, we try to collect the money, or we allow them to tear them down, or what do we do?
As part of the development process, they're required to provide a tree survey and an appraisal for all the trees on the property. Our code is based on preservation, so we make a blanket statement. We want you to try to preserve as many trees as you can. Then there's a give and take. The culmination of those efforts result in either trees being removed, like Mr. Williams has said, or the possible preservation of those. The only way to preserve those and keep them on site is for them to sacrifice units or square footage or parking in order to keep that. And the amount of pressure we feel for them to not have to do that is pretty intense. So this solution to preserve that tree and relocate it to private property is what we think is a win, because as we know, listen, we're all not as young people here now, and we can plant 100 trees tomorrow that are 12 foot tall, but we'll be very old before we can even sit under them and get shade. So whatever way we can do to preserve large canopy trees in our community is our main goal. And having them help us do that is what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Those fines can get pretty significant. Just to give you an example, on the McNabb property, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay? And they moved a tree that was about 100 years old, Wade? Is that?
Yeah, that's what we're figuring,
98-year-old oak tree. The fine, if they did not move it, was $92,000. So you can move a tree, you can send it on a nice vacation, at $92,000. But as Mr. Cullum knows, I'm kind of a tree nerd for a builder. I'm really a tree nerd, I guess, but I'm on the nerdiest of tree nerds there. But moving these old trees and saving trees of that age, even 30, 40-year-old trees, is something I think that this community really needs to strive to do. And I've unfortunately seen a lot of developers, who don't have the same consideration, but if you think about especially something like a 100-year-old tree, to be able to move that tree and replant it is pretty significant. Unfortunately, there's several trees they're not going to be able to do that with. And there's one I think you told me was even older than that, maybe it's 100, that one that's got the droopy down is over 100 years old, I believe. But there's no way to save that tree, really. So, but as he said, the incentive is hey, we want to save these canopies. An oak tree of that size is, you'd have to have 100 12-foot oak trees to have the same canopy. And like you said, I'm too old. I'm too old. On our family farm, on our family's farm, we have oak trees that are well over 100 years old. And
do you want to relocate any of them to here? Is that too soon?
The cost of moving them from Lake City it would be a lot down I-95. So anyway, so I think that I've obviously talked with him about this, and I think allowing them to potentially promote the ability to put them onto private property as well, or somebody else's property, I think is just another mechanism to potentially be able to save some nice older trees. And but the city as a whole saves its tree canopy, right? You're just moving that canopy around the city a little bit.
I don't know if it's similar, but I heard on the news a few months ago that Miami is trying to do the same thing and really promoting saving the trees due to the heat index that we experienced last year and probably years coming, that this was one of the important things about saving the trees and having people not destroy the trees for that very same reason. So I think we would definitely be in line with our neighbors to do this and really press the builders, I don't know how much we can press them. I guess we can, now that you say that about the money, to save these trees. I don't see, maybe I'm just in a different area, but I don't see that. I just see one day I come and the lot's gone. I don't know what happens to the trees. I just pass by there and go, oh, what was there? And I have to remember because the lot is flattened, so I'm like Carla, I just don't see it. Maybe it's happened, you all have already approved it by that point, but I hope so.
If not, send me the address.
I don't be a snitch, but I will. In this case, I will.
He doesn't have a siren on his truck, but he's got all those other tools, you know.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, is somebody who's lived here for 40 years and has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 canopy trees on my lot, plus a dozen smaller ones. It's important.
Yeah, agreed.
I just feel really good about all the tree talk right now, so thank you.
Don't tell us how excited you are, okay? Please.
Well, four of mine have come from the tree giveaway.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, you ready for a motion?
I am.
I did actually.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
I
Lewis.
just had a couple of questions, and
Yeah, absolutely, please.
talking about the cost of these things. So Ms. Coleman answered my question about the certified arborist, deleting that, I guess. Is there a cost difference between, let's say, I'm a average residential homeowner and I hire a Florida landscape architect versus an ISA certified arborist? Do you know if there's a difference in cost to the average homeowner?
I don't know that it's a staggering difference of cost, but I don't think that an arborist is going to be as much as a landscape architect. And our code allows for, if the trees are below a certain DBH of 18 inches, there can give us just the simple facts. It's a oak tree, it's got a 6-inch DBH, and it's in good condition. And that's enough to help us determine for single-family properties how we can help them mitigate or manage the trees on the property. It's really for the developers is where the rubber meets the road as far as this change.
Okay, and we deleted the word assessment and added in appraisal. Does that have a particular reason?
Yeah, it's because of the International Society of Arboriculture. The terms that they use we're trying to align ourselves with just the term.
Okay, I thought that might just be
Sir?
nomenclature. Same question as far as the cost goes. We added in this for root barriers. And again, I'm just kind of looking at it from like average homeowner trying to do something on their property day to day. Is this a significant cost? How is this going to affect everybody that's going to deal with this?
So, yeah, a couple things. For the most part, it's for trees planted close to hardscape driveways or roadways, and really the effect on single-family homes is minimal. I don't know that I can remember 1 or 2 properties, single-family, that have wanted to put root barriers in or that we even asked them to. This is more for large-scale properties, abutting right-of-ways, sidewalks, big development, and it's really cost prohibitive. It's not that much. I believe one of the major distributors is here in Pompano Beach. It's just really a fabric with some chemicals in it that slowly retard root growth towards it and deflect it to grow along it parallel as opposed to through it or under sidewalks or into infrastructure or drainage or sewer pipes or the like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Those are
Sir?
Okay.
And on a note of that, in Palmyra, we didn't have that when it was developed, and we have a mess in our parking lots from trees that were planted without root barriers, and kind of hard to go back and retrofit them. So that's a good rule.
That's true.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mrs. Coleman.
I make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Board recommends approval of the amendments to the landscaping revisions and dune enhancement ordinance as presented by staff.
We have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll, please.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All that nice tree talk, huh? Is that like, are you going to have a, what do they call those? A podcast? You going to have a tree podcast? A support group. Yeah, but I don't think you can have a support group at Flanagan's, can you? Is that allowed? I don't know. Okay. All right, thank you. With that, is audience to be heard? There's nobody in the audience to be heard tonight. Next item on the agenda is chair and vice chair nominations.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mrs.
I move that
Novak.
we retain Fred Stracer as chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board.
Second.
Okay, we have one nomination. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none?
No.
I'll close the nominations, and since there's only one, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
You do not get to vote no.
Okay.
How many years has it been, Fred?
I don't, I would say probably about 12 or
I'd say more than
something like
10.
that. Yeah, it's about 12. We have no other suckers. And the next item is the vice chair nominations.
Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Carla Coleman as vice chair.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, we'll close the nominations. All in favor of Mrs. Coleman, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, great, thank you. Next item is staff reports. Yeah, because you didn't talk enough tonight, huh? Jeez, oh man, this guy's taking this stuff serious. No, I'm just kidding. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to report that tomorrow night we are having a public meeting at 6 p.m. in the chambers for the vulnerability assessment, which is the state of Florida has the Resilient Florida program, and they've financed all kinds of, they've provided grants for all kinds of resilient projects, one of which is a vulnerability assessment. This is very fortunate for us because it was also a assessment that was identified in our own sustainability strategy as a city. So they paid for it, so we took the money. So we're almost through that process, and the assessment is generally looking at future scenarios of sea level rise, flood inundation, rain, things like rain, storm surge, and also like heavy storm events. Like, so if there's a 100-year storm event, how would that surge affect different assets in the city? Fortunately, those would be temporary situations, but things that we need to be aware of. So it's under these scenarios, which of our assets are the most critically vulnerable? And so tomorrow night is a public meeting,
I'm sorry, what time is it, 6?
6 p.m.
Okay.
in the chambers.
Is it going to be live and taped and all
It
that?
will be recorded and posted on YouTube. It'll also be live broadcast on Channel 78.
Okay. Thank you.
Much.
Anything else? Is that, we're done? Staff? Oh, Bobby? Yeah.
I wouldn't be a good son if I didn't give the recognition of my resignation of my father, of Major Wayne Atkins of BSO, serving 44 years for the city of Pompano Beach, and also a great father too. I just
Yeah.
wanted to give him his props.
Okay.
I didn't know he was your father. We presented him with a plaque at the Economic Development Council the other night. It was
Yes.
very moving. Got a great picture of him now.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Board member discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Saunders, did you have anything tonight? No. Board member discussion. Mr. Clausewitz.
Mr. Chairman, always a pleasure to serve. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Kovac.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Coleman.
Thank you for another year as vice chair. And I've talked to most of you, but I'm just a brand-new grandmother, about
Yeah.
to fly off to Denver to meet my new granddaughter in a week or two, and
Congratulations.
it's been an amazing time so far.
That's great. Mrs. King.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Smith.
I just want to say, the other day I was taking shortcuts through Oakland Park, and I thought, they really need some ordinances that Pompano Beach has, because you can see all kinds of junk from the road. And we have a 10-foot wall that we're requiring to build, so we don't have to see the junk in Pompano Beach. And that, kudos to you guys for doing that.
Yeah, we just send them to Oakland Park. That's what.
Yeah, we try to.
You want that? No, that uses Oakland Park. That's where you, no, just kidding. Mr. Lewis.
So it's my 1-year anniversary of being on the board, just about.
All right.
So I want to
Congratulations.
thank you for the opportunity to, serve and give back to the community. It's been really great, so I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Okay.
And staff.
Thank you. I have a quick summary of some things that I did. Since we just started the new year, of course, I guess everybody saw that last year topped 600 million in construction valuation, which is the third year, I believe, in a row that we passed through $100 million barrier from 3s to 4s to 5s and now to 6. And I had a somewhat of a discussion with Mr. Rada, and one of the things that I was concerned about is making sure that, and he said that the volume, permit volume is high enough, and he's still seeing that we are actually still having a lot of the smaller, remodelings and small construction and things like that going on, because even though obviously the big numbers come from these big projects, we want to make sure that up and down the economic strata that we are able to deliver to our community, and so it appears that we are. So that was a concern of mine. And I talked to 3 of our large developers before this meeting because I wanted to see what their takes were on 2024. So I talked to Mr. Adachi, who has the project that is finishing up in Old Town right now, and he is still optimistic, but he's a little concerned, as many people were, about the interest rates in terms of his next project and whatever. So I think right now he may, even though his project is starting to lease up, that, there was a little concern there expressed from him. I talked to Mr. Corlew, whose project is the 24th Avenue, just north of the McNabb House, the new McNabb House, or old McNabb House project, which is finishing up. And he really gave me a whole plethora of information. His west building has TCOs. He's moved in as of yesterday, or the day before when I talked to him. They had moved in 90 people. They had 112 of those units leased out of 208 in that building. And it's still leasing up strongly. The numbers, the rental numbers had over the 3 or 4 year period of this developing, had gone up, as many of us know, because we're having a lot of pressure on this per square foot pricing for rentals and stuff. But of course, they had to fight back things like rising interest rates, right, on their construction carry. And as we know, construction costs had gone up, but he believes there's a stabilization coming, that they're starting to see stabilizing numbers in the construction side, which is good. Where he really, and this was surprising to me, but where he really felt like the developers and these apartments were getting really hammered was, they had a number, I'm not going to tell you exactly what that number was, but they had a number for insurance per front door that from 3 or 4 years ago, and it's literally 3 times that much now that he's actually putting insurance on it, on his building. And those types of things, of course, are pretty detrimental to our development folks, because it's pretty hard to plan around something that drastic. One of the things that they're doing, they're obviously moving to the east building, and I believe he believes that they'll TCO that in March. So, and he feels very comfortable that they're leasing up, at a pretty good pace. So, he's pretty comfortable with that. And as if you've been by there recently, you'll see the plaza is coming along. He said by middle of February, he believes that they will have completed the plaza redevelopment. And you also may have noticed, I noticed because of my construction background, but they are stripping the outside of the building. They've decided to upgrade the Bank of America building and put a glass facade around it. They were always scheduled to repurpose the inside because it was 1970s construction and they wanted to upgrade their building for that. But they had not planned initially on upgrading the outside of those buildings, but they are. They just believe that long-term, they need to do it and bring it up to today's, standards. He said that construction should be done and CO'd in August. And on the east side, they have the Chase building, the old Chase Manhattan building, and they have moved Wells Fargo into that building. And one of the to me, one of the most interesting things is that Wells Fargo, who is notoriously hard to deal with, has put that entire block on the marketplace for sale, which, considering we've had a hard time moving Atlantic Square forward on anything, that would be the largest property left along the Atlantic corridor. Had a really good discussion. Mrs. Smith, you will take notes on this because I had a long discussion with your commissioner today, but I had a long discussion with Corey Long from Cordish. The lake, his Center Lake property or lake is about 75% done, and of course they've started the loop road, that main loop road that goes through there. So that construction's moving along. He believes that in February he'll have his deal cut on the first part of the residential, 430 units scheduled. That is somewhere in the 20% range of what they are planning to do in terms of both the property, physical property, and the development count, the unit count. The live resort and the Publix are scheduled to break ground or start construction in Q2, second quarter of this year. The warehouses, they believe they will break ground in May or June of this year. Obviously, massive industrial project. This is something that you probably ought to really clue in on. Racetrack Road, they believe they will have the improvements that they have to do to Racetrack Road. They believe they will have their final sign-offs from DOT and the county, and will break ground on that in a month. So they'll start tearing up the Racetrack Road. It's a 12-month project, is what he told me. So I guess if they get through, if it carries through this season, that hopefully it'll be done by the beginning of next season. Not so much on Power Line Road. The permitting for that and the scheduled starting is probably a month behind that. So they will probably start that in February, and that's a 16-month project. So they'll go through 2 seasons on Power Line Road, being partially torn up from Atlantic Boulevard to McNabb Road. So I guess you need to warn your people that it's coming. It's probably good to get it all over with at one time.
Well, I just find it's best to be able to communicate and let them know before it comes, so to get sidetracked with it. But I also noticed that they're building the berm between Cypress Bend and the property, the Cordes property, the berm's going up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
that's probably as a piece of the loop road, because that would have been all in this. I think that's all in the same permit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's pretty tall. I mean, they said all along it was going to be that tall, and it is. So it'll be beautiful.
Yeah, so.
Thanks for the updates.
Okay, so so those are the 3 big developers that I talked to. And I thought it would be worth talking to them for 2024 to take their temperature on things. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
on behalf of the board members and the staff, I move we adjourn.
Okay, so moved.